Hi, Frank Giavello with Awards Daily. Actor, singer, songwriter Jason Schmidt is currently wowing audiences in Broadway's newly crowned Tony-winning Best Musical, The Outsiders. Jason's killing it, 8 performances a week as Sodapop, and I'm happy to have him here today. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you for having me.
Jason, firstly, congrats. How does it feel to be in the Tony-winning Best Musical?
Oh man, it's slowly processed throughout the few days. I think it'll continue to process more. It's strange. I think it's something we all thought we could achieve, and you never know. You really never know with the awards which way it goes or what show ends up taking it home. But we all believe in it a huge amount, and I believed in it since La Jolla. And so grateful that we were recognized in this way.
It's pretty amazing. So, tell me a little bit about what the Tony experience was like. The New York Post said you guys partied until 6 a.m. Is that true?
I personally didn't, but I know for a fact that some people did. I was home and in bed by like 4:30. I love a party, but I also love to sleep. And I'm not like an all-nighter person, you know. If I'm still up when the sun is coming up, I need to go to bed.
Understandable. Well, what was it like performing on stage?
It was incredible. It was electric. In the rehearsal for the performances, they have all the headshots of the people who are going to be there and where they're going to be seated, and so you're seeing all the names you're about to perform in front of: Jennifer Hudson, Leslie Odom Jr., so on and so forth, and it's crazy. And then to be there in person is a whirlwind. We're only on stage and in the building even for on stage for like 4 or 5 minutes, in the
Mm.
building for 10, 15. And it goes by so fast, and it was incredible. The energy was so cool, to feel the support of the community.
Yeah, it was over. The whole experience, though, it must have been and still must be a whirlwind for you because starting with the New York Times article about you guys taking the trip across Tulsa, it's sort of
Yeah,
been nonstop, hasn't it?
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, we did that. We went to see Tulsa in, mid-January, and since then for us it's been the rest of the year has kind of been outsiders, 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 which is so cool and tiring in a lot of ways. But yeah, I love the people I get to do it with, so it's all good things.
It's amazing. Well, before we get into the sort of meat and potatoes of Sodapop and The Outsiders, I wanted to mention that I saw this show first in preview and then I saw it again Wednesday. It was really interesting because you had two different brothers on Wednesday afternoon. And I'm curious, how does your performance change when understudies slip in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think as an actor, I try to be as, malleable as possible, and I try to react and listen real time. And so when a different actor steps into the role, they bring a different energy, a different delivery, and I try my best to work around that and I'm still soda pop, everything with that stays the same, but the way that I react to lines is different. And so it changes the whole show in a lot of ways for me. And I know I had a friend come a few months back, and then he came a few weeks ago, and he said the same thing, that it felt he saw different people in different roles, and it felt like a different show, which he thought was fun, getting to experience the same story in a different way. And I think our director and our creative team have been very clear that they want, there's some shows where they want the story told, and they want the characters to kind of stay in this lane. You can
Yeah.
kind of move around in this lane, but this lane has to be the same. And for our show, for all the people who have come into it someday, for the people who understudy and come on stage at different points now, they want them to do their version of this character. And obviously that still stays in some type of lane, but I think for this show, the lane is a bit wider, which as an actor is so exciting, because it's 8 shows a week. It can get daunting at points when it's the same thing every night. So when new people step in, it's so fun, and I love that part of what we do.
The audience energy is different, fascinating too, because I remember in preview, there were certain people, sitting there basically, like prove to me that you don't suck, as
Mhm.
opposed to Wednesday where there was just this wanting to love the show.
Right. Right. Yeah, that was, I think that's a little unique to like the Broadway community and audience, which, it's the highest level of what we do. And so when I've done regional shows or things like that before it, generally the audiences are pretty accepting. They come to see a show, they know what they're getting generally. And even in La Jolla, I felt it's a new show. You never know how it's going to be received. And I always felt like the audience came with open arms. And here in New York, it was kind of a fun challenge. It seems like you gotta uncross their arms a bit and prove to them that you belong and that the show is as good as we all believe it to be. And that was definitely daunting. I remember the first time I stepped on stage in New York and felt that it was like, okay, it's not going to be easy. You got to win them.
Yeah.
But I love that challenge. I thought it was so fun to do that with the cast and to win our audience over.
Well, you guys did. You broke through. So tell me about the casting process from La Jolla to Broadway, because I know Brody was the original Soda, and
Mhm.
Casey Likes played Pony. Like, how did things evolve for you?
Yeah. So Brody and Casey were those roles in the Darrel Roth, which is a workshop of it here in New York. And when it moved to La Jolla, Casey took a different show, and Brody ended up moving over to Ponyboy. And I was in Vancouver shooting the Grease Rise of the Pink Lady series, and got an audition for Bob actually initially, the main Soc, who's
Oh,
but not a great guy. And I had a lot of fun with it because the character I was playing in Vancouver, he also wasn't always a great guy, but he had good intentions. He's supposed to be this golden retriever. So playing a different character who was kind of openly nasty at points was, while he's still human, was super fun to tackle. And I asked my agents when I got that tape if there was any tapes for the greasers, because my dad read the story to me growing up, and I love all those characters. One of my mom's favorite movies was The Outsiders. And they said at the time that they didn't. And throughout the process, Brody ended up moving over. So there was a slot open, and I started auditioning for Soda. And I mean, truly, it fit like a glove. Like the song, we had to bring in an extra song, an outside song, not from the show, for our initial audition, our initial callback. So when I was in for Bob, I sang "Night Moves" by Bob Seger, and even that song, like, is Soda in all purposes. And so it was so interesting how even auditioning and calling in callbacks for Bob, I was giving hints of Soda even then.
I love how sweet he is, and he's so infectious in his positivity, and I mean, you also have a lot of comedy to play, which is nice too.
Yeah, so fun. I love that part of it. And in a show like ours that is heavy material and sad, there's suicide and murder and all this. You need somebody or multiple people who get to come and enlighten the audience a bit. And with the last scene, for instance, with
Mm.
just three brothers, it's really dark for a second, and then Stay Gold happens, and there's a little bit of a lighter feeling, but it's still pretty dark. And at first, in the preview process in La Jolla, you're getting laughs at lines at that scene that you might not expect, or that, um, because the line is the scene is very serious. And then our director Danya, Tony Award-winning director Danya Tammy, said that laughter and comedy in that moment actually allows the audience to lean deeper into the feeling that they're feeling, the darker feeling, the sadder feeling. And I thought that was so inspired, and it's continued to ring true. You feel this kind of light, and then pulling back into the darkness, and it's a really cool thing. And I think good art is complicated and makes you feel a lot of things, not just one. And I think our show does a beautiful job at that, with so many scenes that have such a mixture of feelings to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk about the Coppola film for a minute, because
Yeah.
there's the 1983 film, and then there's the 2005 novel version,
Mhm.
where so much of Soda's cut scenes were restored. And,
Right.
you know, Rob Lowe actually has a really, really good performance that you never saw in the original film. I'm curious, have you seen the 2005 restored cut?
Yeah, yeah. I've actually read both of Rob Lowe's autobiographies, just kind of the little prep, even though only a small part of it is about outsiders and soda pop. But I enjoyed reading about his life, and he talks a lot about how he had no idea what was cut from the original version until he got to the premiere and watched it and was like, oh, I'm not really that big of a part in this movie. And it's interesting because I think in the book, soda is talked about a ton. Talked about though, you know, it's all Pony's descriptions or storytelling of things. And the role he plays in the actual plot is actually much smaller, you know. Um, and so it is kind of interesting because when you look at the movie or even the show, it's like where do you slip this character in, or how much can you really use him to make an impact on the story, when in the book he wasn't always a part of the plot in certain points. But I feel very blessed with the amount that Soda was given, and I think it rings true and helps move the story along. And I think one of the most impactful parts of the show is when the three Curtis brothers are on stage and you're telling that story and you get to see the dynamic, because it's so, like, the amount of people that have come up to us and told us that it reminded them of their sister or their brother and that they want to call them now. Or I had a girl tell me the other day that she has an older sister and they don't really get along, and
Hmm.
she, like, was going to call her after the show because she felt like she saw her in a new light based on the relationship that Soda and Darrel had. I mean, that's why, you know, we're doing this thing in the first place. It's so special.
It's so nice to hear you say that. It really is. And throwing in the towel for me was a really deeply affecting number.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That was, I can like picture in this moment the first time I heard it in La Jolla. Like, obviously I had the sheet music going into the show, and so I was learning the song, but it's very different to plunk the song out on a piano than it is to hear Jamestown sing it for us for the first time. And as with so much of this music, I was just so deeply affected by it. And you know, doing it 8 shows a week, there's definitely been shows in my life that you get a little bored of the content that you have to do every night. And this show is just not one of those. Like, getting to sing Throwing in the Towel, Soda's Letter nightly, they're these beautiful songs. And, you know, to the creative team's credit, they let me play with it more than I think some shows let actors play with what they're doing. And so, which I think goes across the board for the cast. But I just feel lucky to get to sing their songs every night.
Let's talk about Danya,
Yeah,
and her process and how her process melded with yours.
yeah. Danya is one of the most inspired human beings I've ever gotten to work with. She has such a skill for people, for seeing people. You know, we have an incredibly talented cast, incredibly. And the cooler part of that is it's a group of really beautiful people. And you know, that's such a hard thing to find, I think. There's a lot of egos in this career, and there's you'd be few and far between to find one in our cast. And she's very loose, you know. She has a structure. She has such an opinion on the characters on the show, on the scenes. But the first thing we always do is play with our impulses. You know, it's the first thing we did in rehearsals. We didn't block it. We just tried things, and then slowly she'll take our impulses and shape it into the scene, which I think as an actor allows you to, and you know, that's not true for all scenes. I think some scenes she had a bigger map of what she wanted, and maybe she started with a map and just wanted us to feel loose to do our impulses in the first place, because you know, she starts to sculpt it into a sculpture and give it movement and give it levels. And I always thought that was so cool because it can be hard to work with a director that gives you the whole blueprint and you just have to fit into it, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm not that type of actor. I think I have been in my life and I can be, but where I do my best work is when you really allow me to like cut loose. And I think I'm lucky with that with the character of Soda too, because he's such a loose human being. But with Dania directing me as Soda, it always felt so loose. It's felt so loose since La Jolla, and I owe a lot of that to her because she always let me follow my impulses. And even there's some things where it's like, if you want to try it, try it. And then the next show she'll be like, that didn't work. And I'll be like, that's great. Okay, I'll try something else, you know? And I love that because it's a discovery. It keeps me involved in the process, which I think can be hard to do when you have such a vision for a show, and she balances that brilliantly.
I'm on that along those lines. I'm curious, was it your decision to spend the first part of the show shirtless? Because my plus one said it. She said, "Wow, he's eye candy." And then by the end of the show, she realized how talented you were too. So kudos.
That's so funny. It was not. I mean, it was definitely not something I was opposed to. But it was in La Jolla. Actually, it's funny. We had 4 or 5 different characters take their shirts off at different points. And then over here, she was like, "You're the only one I can really justify in the show." Which makes sense, you know. Even though it is a small justification, I take it off to help clean up Ponyboy's blood and stuff after he's beat up by the Socs. Um, but it was not my choice. Perfectly happy to do it. Um, it is funny. I know my understudy, at least the one that's gone on so far, decided that he didn't want to take his shirt off, and they were perfectly fine with that as well. But I was like, dang it, now everyone's gonna think that I decided to take my shirt off and that it was my choice. Um, but yeah,
Well, Jason, let me tell you, I thought it was a really good actually reflection on the character because
yeah,
for me, it was like, wow, Soda has this confidence
oh
and I
yeah,
liked it.
yeah. I also think it like while doing it on stage comes across a certain way. I think it is like truthful. You know, you're in Tulsa in Oklahoma. It's probably hot. I spend a lot of my life at home or around my friends with my shirt off, you know what I'm saying? And it's kind of a natural state. And so I do think it like makes sense. You know, you're hot, you're outside, you're hanging out with all your best friends. If you want to take your shirt off, that happens all the time. So it's like I do think it works for the character. I think it gives him a boost of confidence. I think um he is this kind of ladies man, and he has this charm, and he does live life exactly how he wants to in all facets of it. And so I think it reflects really well as being truthful.
Absolutely. Okay, Rumble time. First time I saw the show, I was struck by the Rumble because I kept thinking, oh my God, how has nobody gotten hurt? Or I'm sure people have gotten hurt. I really watched you this time during the Rumble, and it is so carefully choreographed.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. It's this, you know, you get different perspectives on it from the different places you sit in the theater. You know, we've heard and gotten to experience at certain different points that like up close feels very cinematic. You get a very shot to shot kind of view of what's going on. And if you're sitting farther back, depending on what you want, it might be even better because you get to see the whole thing and this whole kind of collage painting. And oh, I forget what artist the Coopermans related to. There was there was an artist who had these paintings that were very kind of random seemingly in all these different pictures that it did, but then you looked at it from further back and you're like, oh, it's this one painting.
Mm,
um, and they were like, that's what we want the Rumble to feel like. You know, there's so many detailed moments in it, but it can be consumed as one large chunk by looking at all of it. And I think that is so cool. And yeah, it's interesting. We get that all the time. People think it's unsafe or like or worried for the actors, and it actually is an incredibly safe thing. Like we're so choreographed. We have different beats where we move on to other sections to make sure that we're all moving together, you know? And
yeah.
so that like, when there's crosses across the stage, making sure there's nobody crossing at the same time. Because it's raining and it's dark, and the water's in your eyes and the blood gets in your eyes, and it can be hard to see. But I've never had a problem any of the almost 100 times we've done the show at this point with like running into somebody or somebody not being in the right spot or being in my spot. It's always everyone's always in their spots, and because of how well choreographed it is, and we fight call it every day to make sure that we all have it in our bodies and stuff, and it's actually an incredibly safe thing. And there's different kind of vamps that we have when we're waiting to move on to the next section, and within those vamps, if you have a covered enough position, you can be talking to the scene partner that you're fighting with, and sometimes it's in the world of the show, and it's nasty, and sometimes it's like, are you good? Or like, I hit you there accidentally, are you good? And you're like, I'm good. Or just telling them you love them and you're having fun, that happens all the time. The pit actually said early on in previews, all our mics weren't on in the house, but they could hear our mics down below in the pit. And so they were like, we just love hearing all you guys like check in with each other the entire rumble, because they just got to hear all the, you good? Yeah, I'm good. All right, moving on to the next section. Hey, I love you. Like that type of stuff that we're all actually doing within this big thing.
I love it. That's so great. Um, so Jason, tell me about how you're doing 8 performances a week, obviously. How do you balance it with like having a life?
Ah, wish you could tell me. It's my first time doing this long of a run with 8 performances, and I think Broadway's different in the the public eye that it has on it, and the pressure that you might feel doing each show, and so that's draining in a different way as well. um and I'm learning day by day. Think I'm getting better at taking care of myself. The eating was really hard initially, just in terms of like, when do I eat? Because okay, if I eat before the show, I feel like I get a stomach ache when I dance in the first number. Or if I don't eat before the show, or don't eat soon enough before the show, I get really tired because I don't have enough fuel in my body. And
Mhm.
then I have to kind of eat after the show. And so I gotta like take something to deal with the acid reflux that comes with eating right before sleeping, and that type of thing. And what I've realized is that sleep is the most important thing. I have a lot of other things I want to do in my life, friends, gym, I write music and doing all that stuff. And um, I have to put sleep over that. Like, if
Yeah.
there's a day where I have plans in the morning to go to the gym and to come back and write or record, and I wake up and my body hurts and I feel tired, I go back to bed, and I cancel those plans to do the other things, because I just know that, like, if I don't continue to sleep, I'm gonna run myself into the ground. I think now, over a month ago, I got like bronchitis because I was just not sleeping as much as I needed to. And it's hard to sustain health in such a rigorous endeavor. And then the outside life, that's where I think I'm still kind of learning. I think
Mm.
this week I've done a better job. I've seen some more friends and done some activities and stuff like that. And as the schedule loosens up, because leading up to Tony's and previews with all the press and stuff like that, you have the Tuesdays, the Thursdays, the Fridays leading up to the shows. But during those times, we still had interviews, or we had press stuff to do, and photo shoots, and which are all amazing, fun things, but allow, give you a little less of an outside life. So hopefully, as we kind of settle into a more usual routine, I'll be able to find that and find where that works for me more. Um, but
Well,
I'm
it sounds
still,
like you're working on it, which is good.
yeah, absolutely. I think it's important. It's not like there's so many ways to get drained doing something like this. And one of the ways is by only doing this, like, you're an actor, and that is so much the the biggest part of my life at this point. And uh, acting and singing and songwriting are, at this point in my life, like the love of my life. I just love it so much. It feeds me and fuels me so deeply. But if it's the only thing I do, I start to get run down in a different way, mentally. And I think it's so important to have a support system and an activity and things to do, because you're a human being, and you can't dedicate your whole life to this one thing. Not even Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan did that. You still have family, you still have friends. So important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, tell me a little bit about your singing and your songwriting and how important that is to you in your life.
Yeah, oh my gosh. It is unexplainably important to me. I love it so much. I started writing sometime in high school. I can't even remember when I wrote. I almost finished like three different songs that I think only my oldest sister has really ever heard. They were pretty bad, I'm sure. I can't even remember chord progression, lyrics, any of it. Um, but there's something about it that I just loved so much. And then in college, I started writing more, and it became this kind of therapeutic thing for me. I started writing at a time where I was realizing I had the sleep problems before it, but I was realizing that I had these sleep problems and still kind of unfigured out. And you know, but what that did is I couldn't fall asleep for a long time, and so at first I was just spending that time on my phone, watching a TV show, maybe reading a book. But eventually I was like, if I'm gonna be awake anyways, like might as well use this time for something. And so I started writing, and the kind of getting out of that emotion of whatever I was writing about, similar to journaling or something like that, it allowed me to kind of settle my mind and my spirit into a place where I could sleep more, you know, fully. And then I wrote more and more, and it became this thing, this therapy for me, where every situation in my life that I couldn't understand or couldn't handle in my head, I would get it out in a song instead. And even to the point where, like, if there was a situation that I wrote a song about that continued to bother me after writing it, which truly was kind of rare, I would play that song every time I felt that feeling of anxiety based around it. I would take out my guitar and I'd play the song, and it would ease it. And I always was so fascinated by that part of the songwriting for me. And going along with that, I started releasing some stuff in college, and I love watching I'm grateful that I did it. I look back, and not all of the songs I've released I think are like my best work or anything like that, but I'm grateful I did it because I can see that growth. And I think it's important because I think some people have this idea that people who are great at things have always been great at them,
Mm.
and that, you know, you're just gifted or you're not gifted. And I do think gifts play into things a lot, but the work you put into it and the time you spend on it is so much more important. Um, and so I hope that as I continue to release and grow as a songwriter, people will look back at some of the older stuff and hopefully have an appreciation for it, but also see like, oh, he's grown a lot. And you can see, maybe inspire people who don't feel like what they're writing or what sport they're playing they're that great at. Inspire people to put in the time to, make themselves great at what they want to be great at, because you can make yourself great at anything if you put in that time.
I completely agree. It's that evolution, and keep writing from your personal, experience. That it's that catharsis. I'm a writer myself, and
Yeah.
that's where you feel the growth. That's
Yeah.
where, yeah.
Yeah. It's so cool because it's a double growth I feel when I write, because it's a personal growth because you look inside yourself and you analyze, and and then also you grow in that craft itself. And I also, yeah, I write some scripts and stuff, and I haven't done anything with that, and I hope to someday. um but I also even feel the work I put in as a songwriter doesn't have a perfect translation, but it does have a little bit of a translation. And the way you use words and tell stories, I think if you kind of grow yourself as a storyteller, you start growing in all those facets, even if it's focused on one specific medium.
Um, this is like almost a silly question, but like looking ahead 2, 3 years, what would the Jason dream life be?
Oh man. I'm an ambitious dude. I got a lot of plans. I got a lot of goals. I think a lot of the acting wise involves I wanna I love the medium of film and TV. And I love the way that the looseness you get when acting on that medium and the truth that you get to bring out. Because in theater, pronunciation is important and volume is important and all these other things that aren't perfectly the truth of this moment you have to do. And I think there's such a beautiful art to that, and that is theater. And the people who can make you feel the utmost truth while doing all those things are the great theater performers of our time. And I have such a draw to being able to do that as well. But there's something to me so raw about TV and film that I just love. You don't have to put anything on. It's all about what you actually feel in the moment, and even more about sometimes what you're hiding, or you know
Yeah.
I love that. So that is definitely in the future. I think I'm going to release much more music. I'm going to start performing it live more, and we'll see where that takes me. Um, yeah, got a lot of plans.
I love hearing that. Jason, thank you for taking the time out
Of
to
course.
chat. Uh, honestly, I thought you gave one of the, and when I say I've seen everything, I mean I've seen everything. I thought you gave one of the best performances of the season in this. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Such a wonderful chat.
Thank you.
Yeah.